We all want to provide a client experience that not only engages, but also makes us a magnet for exactly the right types of clients. But according to my guest, the founder of Absolute Engagement, Julie Littlechild, we have a problem. The way in which we need to engage clients as financial advisors is being disrupted, and you may not be keeping pace. We use old approaches to tackle new challenges, and in this interview, Julie is going to share trends that will impact you and the specific thing that advisors can do today to stand out.
This is the Resilient Advisor Podcast, the show for high-performing financial advisors. We bring you the best practices of the industry's top performers so that you can build resilience in your business and your personal life.
Thanks for downloading this episode of the Resilient Advisor Podcast. My name is Jay Coulter, and joining me for this episode is Julie Littlechild. Julie is a thought leader on client engagement for financial advisors. She's a speaker, writer, and researcher. Her firm, Absolute Engagement, helps advisors tailor their client experience to support a compelling personal vision for the future. She has worked with and studied successful advisors, their clients, and their teams for more than 20 years. And she is also the co-host of the Becoming Referable podcast. And her first book, The Pursuit of Absolute Engagement, was released in January of 2017. Julie, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, it's awesome. I'm so excited to be here.
I know we're going to deliver a lot of great value to listeners today around this topic of engagement. You say that advisors need to engage with their clients differently. Put a little color on that.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about it with identifying some of the problems. So yeah, look, we all have this shared goal, right? That we get into this industry, we want to deliver an amazing client experience, something we feel proud of, something our clients feel good about. But let's face it, the world is kind of changing around us, and it's pretty easy to get stuck in the way that we learned to do these things. And I do think that's a problem. I always tell this story when I'm trying to talk about this problem about the way in which I was trying to teach my son about music. And I was digging around for the old mixtapes that my husband made me when we met. Mm-hmm. and I'm thinking, oh, he's going to love this. I'm going to show him a mixtape. It's going to be awesome. And he kind of looks at me and he's like, yeah, there's iTunes now, Mom. We really don't need this anymore, right? And I thought, yeah, you know what? And the thing is, he's right, because if I wanted to really accomplish my goal in that case, I needed a new method. And I think the same is true with client experience. We've just got to look at what's working now.
Yeah, the dogma is rampant in this industry. You know, most of the financially successful financial advisors have built their business in the 80s, 90s, or the beginning of this century, and the ways in which they did that were just fundamentally different on so many levels. Mm-hmm. So some of your research suggests that clients, they're actually satisfied. So if they're satisfied, are advisors doing it right? Do we really need to change things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because, I mean, to some extent you could argue, well, if satisfaction is my goal, then we're doing pretty well, right? So we go out and we talk to investors every year and we gather this data and we see that, 89-90% of clients say they're somewhat or very satisfied, and they say they plan on continuing to work with their advisor. So to some extent, that's really great news, and I think we should kind of acknowledge and appreciate that. But I think if our goal goes beyond satisfaction, because here's the thing, if your clients are satisfied, it kind of makes you just as good as everyone else. Mm-hmm. If the goal is to set yourself apart, if the goal is to become that magnet for the right clients, then I think we need to look a little further ahead and look at deeper engagement so that we don't kind of wake up one day and discover that everything has moved beyond us, and we're just trying to keep pace. So yes, clients are satisfied. I just argue that might not be enough.
In those satisfaction surveys, what type of questions are they asked with regards to how they're satisfied?
Well, so we go out and do this industry research all the time, and we ask about some high-level metrics like satisfaction, loyalty, net promoter score, value. I mean, there's a whole referability. There's a whole range of different ways you can measure that, and then we drive down further to look at what is actually contributing to those particular metrics. But in terms of just general satisfaction, just on an outright question like, are you satisfied with your advisor? That's where we get the 90%. And do you plan on continuing to work with your advisor? Again, that's where we get the 89%. But it doesn't mean they're referring. It doesn't even mean that they'll stick around. It just typically means that as far as they know, that's a decent relationship, and until something changes, they're not going anywhere.
So then, to interject an analogy, I recently purchased a car. My experience was fine. They have metrics that they're measured on as sales professionals, where they call. I gave them all hundreds. I was satisfied, but it didn't necessarily mean I was going to call my neighbors or jump on social media and say, hey, you need to go check out XYZ dealership. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So there wasn't something, and I tell you what, let me add to that, because I recently took my car in to get fixed. And I go to the same dealership, and you know what? They're probably fix my car in the same way as every other dealership. I don't think they're magic. But here's what they do. Whenever I go in, the guy kind of says, okay, here's the 1,200 things that always seem to need done whenever you take your car in. But he talks me through. He called up on his computer sort of pictures of the parts he was talking about. He showed me what happens. He helped to educate me. And in many respects, that was going above and beyond. And I actually did tell people about that because I felt more empowered coming out of that particular experience.
So based on that experience you had, what fundamental change needs to happen for financial advisors to make that type of difference, to have that kind of impact?
Well, I think, if you look at, and I'm sure there are some differences in the way people go about this, but let's look at a typical way of thinking about client experience. So what do? We segment our clients, right, based on value. So we've got some ABC clients, let's say, and then perhaps we tier our service levels. We look at frequency of contact, more contact for A's, less for C's. We might have a team where we can delegate some of that contact. We might have a different fundamental offer for our better clients. We might do comprehensive financial planning for our best clients and a simple retirement projection for our smaller clients. I think this is a very typical way. We kind of create a service matrix, right? And that's client experience. We think about the scope of the offer. Where I think that we're going is kind of moving beyond that. I'm not suggesting that's not important. I think it is. But if we move beyond that and say, well, what's above and beyond that scope of service, that's where I think we need to start looking at certainly some of the trends that are impacting engagement and look at the client's journey. And instead of saying, what can we offer? Ask, how does our offer fit into the overall client's journey, and how can we support them in that? And all of a sudden, it's a different perspective. All of a sudden, we're thinking more about how can I truly support my clients based on the unique challenges that they have versus just focusing on things like frequency of contact.
Could we go a little deeper on that? What are some trends that you're seeing that would drive that experience you're talking about?
Yeah, I love to look at trends. I mean, and in some respects, I feel like, we spend so much time in our industry, don't we, looking at our industry data, right? We love benchmarking studies in this. And look, I've done many of them. So I don't disagree that they're important. But what we end up doing is kind of comparing ourselves to one another. And that sets a very different bar than if we, for example, looked around us at different examples outside our industry. If we thought about, our clients live and work in the real world every day of their lives, and they interact with different brands and organizations, and they're being taught about different ways to engage. And I have a hard time believing that all of that goes out the door, and they cease to think about that as soon as they walk in their financial advisor's door. So that's often when we're looking at trends, and what we're often doing is just going outside and looking at how we as people experience engagement. And there's a few things, I think, there's three in particular that I think are pertinent for us, right? I mean, there's probably a lot of trends, but things that I think may be impactful for advisors. The first is the idea of co-creation of value. It's not a new concept, but if you look at, look at Starbucks or something, just as an example, you see all these incredible examples of co-creation where you can go online and contribute thoughts on product ideas, on where they should invest their charitable dollars, on the kind of experience that you're going to have when you go to Starbucks. And everything about that, the cafe that you walk into is a reflection of what their clients want. So, I mean, that's just kind of a simple example of how value is being co-created. So I do think we'll see more of that in our industry, where we need to perhaps invite the client into the discussion, understand more about how we fit into their worlds, and what we can do to drive deeper relationships. So more of a partnership. That's certainly one of the first trends I see.
So would that be created through a traditional focus group or a client advisory board? How do you see the execution of that for the financial advisor?
Yeah, I think it's definitely more qualitative types of feedback. So, one of the simplest things that I always encourage advisors to do is just do a set of interviews. So first of all, I love advisory boards. I think they're a great tool. They just take some work, right? It takes some strategy and investment of time and thought to get it working. Mm-hmm. But if we took that concept of having a conversation with clients so we ask advisors to identify maybe 5 or 10 clients who fit squarely within their ideal client. And instead of going to them and saying, how can we change? Right? So, and that's kind of a logical way to think about it. But the fact is, if you go to clients and say, how can we change? How can we be different? How can we serve you better? You get a deer in the headlights kind of look, right? Nobody or platitudes, right? Mm-hmm. You're wonderful. Everything's great. Yep. But instead, if you say to them, look, we're going to have a different conversation. Can you tell me what the greatest client experience you've ever had is? Or can you tell me about a client experience that had a profound impact on you? And then begin to just peel back the onion on that, dissect it, probe to understand why. Why did they think of that experience? What words did they use? What feelings did they have? How, go through the entire process. Over the course of several conversations, what we do is we start to hear more about the deeper parts of client engagement. So it's a different way of getting feedback. So that's one way, and that's just input, if you will, into defining the experience. The other thing could be things like the client review process, right? I think there's an amazing opportunity to do more and better co-creation there. So many advisors I talk to will say, look, I get my clients in, let's say it's quarterly or semi-annually, it doesn't really matter, but they come in, I sit them down, I say, look, is there anything that you want to talk about before we start? So that's a nice, it's a nice to have. Mm-hmm. It's better than not asking them what they want to talk about. Doesn't matter what you want to talk about. But
all depends on how the market's doing.
Well, that's fair enough. Yeah. What do you want to talk about other than the market? That would be. But so again, we kind of pick up on this survey approach and say, well, what if you, before a meeting, sent a 1-question poll to your clients that said, can you rate your level of concern with the following things? And that might be, yeah, it might be your kids making good financial decisions or aging parents, or it might be the markets, but it probably isn't. It's probably some other life issues. Well, what you can then do, of course, is take those results and use that as the basis for the review meeting. It's another form of starting to co-create the agenda without relying on your clients to know what they should be talking about.
Excellent. So we were talking high level about trends that we need to be thinking about as it relates to engagement, and co-creation was one of them. What's another trend?
Well, I think personalization. And it's funny because I don't know about you. I remember when I got into this industry, it was all about standardization, right?
Absolutely.
And there's some logic to that. So we want our clients to have a consistent, robust, repeatable experience. And McDonald's is born. And, I always joke that you used to walk into a Marriott. You could walk into a Marriott anywhere in the world and not know where you were because, everything would be the same about it.
Yep.
The portrait on the wall and the food in the restaurant. So we bought into that hook, line, and sinker, but increasingly we're trying to hold on to the benefits of, say, mass customization, but being able to personalize the communication process around the unique needs of our clients. So, the best example of that for me is like an Apple, for example. When I call Apple for support, and in the process of waiting, they ask me while I'm on hold what kind of music I want to listen to. And I can pick top 40 or opera or whatever I'm in the mood for today. In a way, that's a form of personalization. Now, I don't think advisors are going to do that on their teams, but maybe it is. Maybe it's tailoring our client communications, the articles we send, the workshops we run, the education that we provide to specifically reflect the unique challenges that our clients are facing. So again, maybe that's financial literacy for the kids, for example. So it's just finding those ways to not assume. As soon as we begin to build our client experience around everyone, I think we start building it around no one. And so if we can hone in on the needs of our best clients and tailor the client experience in some way, I think that we're reflecting that personalization trend.
Excellent. You're taught if you grow up in a big box warehouse that all of your A clients fit into an A model, in a service model. And
right.
What we've done in our practice management business is make sure specifically for that top level, that top echelon of client, that each service level of touch is different because everybody is expecting something different. So right on board with the personalization. What other trends do you see out there that are driving engagement?
I think that, maybe the final biggest one for our industry, and I just touched on it, was the idea, I'll call it focus. I'm tempted to call it niche and the only reason I don't sometimes is because it scares people off. But I do believe that increasingly, if we want to co-create, if we want to personalize, if we want to truly build an experience that reflects the needs of clients, we've got to figure out who we're building that for. And we've got to draw a line in the sand. And I don't think it can be rich people. And I don't think it can be aging people. I do feel like we've got to think long and hard about who we're serving. And those who do that well, I think will be the winners. Now, in our industry, I think what turns a lot of people off the idea of niche, and well, there's several reasons. I mean, some are just afraid.
Or lazy.
Others, well, there's that, but it could mean like, well, what do I do with all the other clients who don't fit? Or what if that means saying no to a client? And it does, right? But it could be target market. So I know a lot of people are drawn to a target market, but others aren't. And I think that's a real thing. But the way I always define niche is it can be a target market or it can be the work that you do, the technical specialization. And even if I took something really broad like retirees or pre-retirees, which is quite vague in a way, and yet very few advisors that I've seen have taken that and then said, all right, well, I'm going to build a truly unique experience that absolutely reflects the very unique needs of people who are going into retirement. All of a sudden, that can be a pretty great niche. But it's the extent to which the client experience in the business is an absolute reflection of who those people are, I think that makes the difference. But that's, again, I think that's the third trend there is this idea of figuring out who you're building the experience to serve.
Yeah, I got to tell you, Julie, based on my experience, and I shared this with financial advisors, that the top performing and happiest advisors, they have I'll use the term niche. It could be focus. It could be target market. It doesn't matter, but they know exactly who they serve. And then they don't have to worry about everything else. And it just drives engagement. It drives their ability to speak their language, and it drives results.
It's so true. And, you just said the happiest, and I would underline that point because I do see a huge connection, and I've written about this, between the business being a reflection of your personal vision. And most of us want to work with a certain type of person, but we just don't always have the courage to draw a line in the sand and do that. So I couldn't agree with you more that when we find that courage to just say, no, I'm going to build this business around the personal vision that I have, all of a sudden you're deeply engaged, and the happy byproduct is it's a better experience for your clients. Mm-hmm.
So as we wrap up this podcast, I like to give specific actionable ideas for financial advisors. Julie, what could financial advisors do today to engage differently and stand out in their market?
So the first thing, and unfortunately maybe the toughest thing I would do, is the last. Think long and hard about who you want your business to serve and define an authentic focus or ideal client. From there, I would go out, I'd pick 5 of them, I'd ask them for a cup of coffee and talk to them about their greatest client experience to begin to gather better information on what that really looks like. And then I would begin to build a communication plan that supports them. Now, that could be a big thing, but say as a first step, it's just, if I can understand the deepest needs of this ideal client, I'm going to go out and find 5 articles that support that. Like, pick something simple, but just make sure that those communications reflect what they care about.
And this reflects back to one of the trends we were just talking about, having that focus and having that niche. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's really all 3 of those things, right? How do I co-create this experience? How do I personalize it around their needs? And how do I do this with a well-defined group of clients?
Okay. So after they figure out exactly who they're going to serve and they're doing their research, what other specific things could they do to engage differently?
Well, I think that, there's complexities around the answer, and I don't want to get too deep in, but one of the things that I would be looking into is this idea of client journey mapping. And really what it just says is understand how your clients experience working with you and make that a whole lot better. So one of the places I would start is the review process. Just take it, dissect it, look at the entire process through your client's eyes, kind of walk in their shoes, understand what they're talking about, how they prepare, what you talk about during the meetings, how they get the information after. If you picked that one area and just went deep to try to improve the process and the communications, I would say that's probably one of the most important places. So to just pull out the piece of all of that, I would say, pick one process and walk through it through the eyes of your clients.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Julie, what else do financial advisors need to know about engagement, engaging with their clients, engaging with their prospects, and how can they find out more information about you and your platform?
Sure. Well, look, I think that client engagement, and if I were to just take it almost up to the next stage, is really a reflection, as I said, of personal engagement. So I don't think any of what we just talked about happens in a vacuum. I think that personal vision drives business vision, drives the client experience. And all of those things need to be tightly aligned if we're trying to ensure that we're personally deeply engaged with our business. So I do think that's as important as the client experience. So I've written a lot about that in The Pursuit of Absolute Engagement was the book that came out around this time last year. So that's one of the best ways to learn about some of these concepts and go deep on client engagement. Also write a blog every week. It comes out on a Tuesday, and we tackle a lot of these issues. So that's another great place to go.
And that blog can be found at absoluteengagement.com. Is that correct?
It can.
Okay.
Yes, that's right.
Excellent. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, Julie, how would they do that?
They can do that through the site or just email me at jlittlechild@absoluteengagement.com.
Excellent. Julie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing with our audience.
It was great to chat with you. Thanks.